AKA they probably doing it. Hi, I'm Ian. Around here, I talk about books because I love to yap. If you're new here, I'd love for you to consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and comment on this video. It really helps. In the comments below, let me know if you like to read holiday-themed books. I personally, it's not something that I'm typically used to, but in this video, I'm gonna have to get used to it. As you can tell, this is the December TBR video. So November was an emotional month. There was an election. I don't know if you heard about it. My relationship with reading was kind of challenged because I went through a phase where I just couldn't read anything at all. I could not focus on a damn thing. And then I suddenly found myself being able to dissociate from all the crazy through reading. And I'm looking at finishing probably anywhere between 10 to 12 books. So for reference, last December, I finished 0 books. So last year I actually was in a very prolonged reading slump, doing a lot of mental health work. So I'm not beating myself up over it. However, if I finish one book, I am on a massive trajectory for improvement in December. This year is going to be vastly different from 2023. I have a fairly large stack of books. Again, I like to choose 12 books as part of my TBR for each month. I have yet to read 12 books in a month, but that's not the goal. The reason why, and this is pro tip for anyone who has decision-making issues, this is a really good thing to do. I have all of these books on my shelves. Decision-making is really, really difficult when you have hundreds of books that you want to read. So I just boil them down to 12. I usually make them theme-related so that is also easier. And then I basically say, these are the books that I'm choosing from, and my goal is to read as many of them as possible. My TBR isn't, I'm going to read 12 books. My TBR is, of these 12 books, I hope to finish as many as I can. Let's go ahead and get started. All Systems Read by Martha Wells. This is a sci-fi kind of corporate dystopian book, and it's the first book of 7 in the Murderbot series. The book follows Murderbot, a sarcastic security android who has hacked its own systems in order to gain freedom. It has been assigned to protect scientists on a distant planet, but things go wrong when a nearby mission suddenly goes missing. So there are some queer themes in this, as Murderbot, the AI, is inherently non-binary. And from what I understand, it also features a sort of reluctant hero trope. It's short, 149 pages. I hear it's really fast-paced. This should be something that I can complete quickly and easily. If I like it, I may read book number 2, though I've heard kind of mixed things about the series as it goes on. So I'm just kind of approaching this as if it's a standalone. If I absolutely love it and find myself dying, needing to know what happens next, I'll pick up a second one. Now, moving over to literary sci-fi. The Employees by Olga Ravn, translated from Danish by Martin Aitken. This is 125 pages. That's what we're talking about. I think this is going to be so good for my needed dopamine hit. This takes place in the 22nd century on a spaceship. On that spaceship, the crew is part human, part humanoid, and they find themselves mysteriously obsessed with objects that they have found on a planet that they call New Discovery. Their obsession drives them essentially to some sort of existential crisis, from what I understand, which sounds really interesting to me. However, I've seen very mixed reactions on this. It does not have very high ratings on really any platform, so I am a little bit nervous. However, I'm kind of holding out for strong authorial voice and the social commentary. Sometimes that is enough, especially in such a short amount of time. That's enough to get me through an entire book. The next book is Tentacle by Rita Indiana. It's translated from Spanish by Achi Ovejas. This is a Dominican author, and this is considered kind of queer sci-fi. And I do think that there are some magical realism elements in here, perhaps, if not just straight up fantasy as well. This follows Asilde, who is a young maid, and it turns out that Asilde has been prophesied to go back in time and save the ocean and humanity, but she cannot do so until she fully transitions into the man she always was with the help of a sacred anemone. And yes, I plucked that from the back. From what I understand, this has themes on climate change, colonialism, religion, queer politics. The only downside is this also has pretty low ratings on Goodreads. However, I'm kind of holding out hope for the fact that I may like it because it will be more literary and character focused than plot driven. All right, and then the last of the really short books is Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. So this is 133 pages. It is a sapphic historical fantasy noir. What? It follows an exiled detective in 1940s Chicago who has sold her soul to the devil in order to save her brother's life. Again, what? She's actually offered a chance to avoid an eternity in hell and to spend the rest of her life with the woman she loves. However, in order to do so, she has to track down the White City vampire, Chicago's most infamous serial killer, and she only has 3 days to do so. I love the idea of combining noir and fantasy, also the sapphic aspect here. Not to mention, it's in 1940 Chicago, and I am a sucker for historical fiction and a historical setting. Also, having had read The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is about the US's first documented serial killer, I'm already kind of drawn to what this book could potentially incorporate just based on actual history. Up next, I have like 3 books that are holiday related. So these are specifically having to do with Christmas. First is The Christmas Orphans Club by Becca Freeman. This is a queer holiday romance with some found family vibes, which I am all about. It's really interesting because this is classified as romance. However, the plot gives no indication that romance is actually at the center of the story. This follows Hannah and Finn, who have been friends since college, and they have spent every single Christmas together since. However, this year, Finn tells Hannah that he is getting ready to move to LA. And in doing so, she realizes this may be their last Christmas to spend together. This is an ensemble cast. It sounds like there are other characters, part of this kind of found family. And I have a feeling that this is going to make me cry. And I am basing that off of the fact that I just recently read in Four Squares by Bobby Finger, which I'm not done reading yet as of recording this, but I cried in chapter 2 at the mere mention of someone moving away. So I don't know. This sounds like it's going to make me cry, right? Then I'm going to read The Nightmare Before Kissmas by Sarah Raasch. Did I do it right? I did it right. This is an Achillean fantasy romance, which is not my typical genre to go to. The book is about Cole Klaus. That's like hard for me to say. L's will always be hard for me. Cole Klaus is the Prince of Christmas. He enters a fake marriage competition. I don't understand really anything about it. Every time I read the back, I'm like, but why? Like, why a fake marriage competition? I don't understand. But he enters a fake marriage competition, and then it turns out that one of his competitors in this fake marriage competition is the competition fake or is the marriage fake? And then, like, if you're competing for, like, isn't that kind of implied? Like, it's a competition. I guess I just don't understand. Whatever. Turns out that his competition in this fake marriage competition is none other than Hex, the Prince of Halloween, who was also recently his one-night stand. I don't really read romance. However, this has been fairly polarizing in how people are talking about this. Apparently there's some sort of political bent to this, or at least some sort of anti-capitalist messaging. I have seen people say, I don't want to read about anti-capitalist messaging, basically like people saying they don't want to read about politics, to which I'm like, okay. Whatever book you're reading, you better put it down. You better put that shit down. But the mere fact that it is polarizing is what has me really interested in this. This is a coin toss for me. We'll see what I think of it. Then the last of these holiday-themed books, this one is actually horror, and that's Secret Santa by Andrew Schaffer. This is satirical paranormal horror. It's about Lucy Meyer, who is desperate for a job and is kind of incidentally hired as an editor of a publishing house in the 1980s. After a Secret Santa gift exchange, wherein Lucy is gifted a cursed item, her coworkers just start mysteriously dying in like really gruesome ways. I just was like, what holiday themed horror novel can I read? And this came up. Sounds kitsch, sounds ridiculous, sounds like it will be a lot of fun, might be a little gruesome. I'm into it. I have very, very low expectations, and I'm doing that from a place of love. I want to enjoy this book, so my expectations are down here, as long as I can find a little bit of fun and joy in this around the holiday times. Not to mention is a signed edition. Then I am going to be reading a translated work that is supposed to be pretty dark and gruesome. That is Confessions by Kanae Minato. This is translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder. This was written in 2008, but wasn't translated until 2014. And from what I've gathered, this is a revenge story about a teacher who decides to enact a plan of revenge on her students for the mysterious death of her 4-year-old daughter. This has Lord of the Flies vibes kind of wrapped up in a revenge narrative. I'm super into revenge narratives. I find them really fascinating all the time. I thought I wasn't one for revenge narratives, but like, y'all, did you read Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby? Because that shit was good. I am kind of hoping for something dark and hopeless with this, which I know sounds bonkers right now, but I am definitely in the mood for something that just feels big in its emotions. Here's hoping that this will live up to those expectations. I grouped the next 3 books together based on their geographical significance because they all take place in the United Kingdom. I didn't plan that, actually. So the first book is Clear by Davies. This is Achillean historical fiction that takes place place in Scotland during what was known as the Scottish clearances. And I think it was like in the 1840s or something. And that's basically when the British government forced poor people from their lands and redistributed it to wealthy landowners. So the book is about a minister named John who's been tasked with evicting one of the last Scottish men from their lands, this man being Ivar or Ivar. However, after John's arrival, there is an accident and the two of them kind of become an unlikely pair, aka they probably doing it. I actually heard about this book from Savage Reads here on BookTube, and it kind of reminded me of another book that he suggested called Pity by Andrew McMillan, which came out this year and was really great. Savage Reads also turned me on to Still Life by Sarah Winman, which is like a 5-star read for me. So I was like, you know what? I may as well just give this a shot. And it's fairly short, coming in at 185 pages. Also, what fascinates me is I know nothing about this point in history. I did not even know what the Scottish clearances was. I had to look it up. Speaking of historical moments that I know very little about, the next book that I'm going to read is Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, subtitled A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland. So this is about a woman who was taken from her 10 children, kidnapped in the middle of the night during what is known as the Troubles, which essentially was the colloquial term for the ongoing conflict between Unionists in Northern Ireland and the IRA in Northern Ireland. The Troubles was really about Unionists wanting to stay in the United Kingdom and the IRA wanting to reunite Northern Ireland with Ireland. I remember very little about this conflict, but this was an active conflict when I was young. I believe in the early 90s there were still car bombings that were happening. Really, really tragic stuff. I've heard that this is amazing. This is also recently made into a limited series on FX, I think. I imagine that I will watch it after reading this. Then I'm going to read The Greatest Night by Thomas Asbridge. I think it's Asbridge. Is it Asbridge or Asbridge? Someone from the UK better tell me about this. So this I am reading for the History Sickos book club, of which I am a part on Fable. If you do not know Fable, you simply must go there. I have my own book club on there, so get on it, get on it. It's so much better than Goodreads, and it's totally free. This is medieval history / kind of biography. This is about William Marshall, who was a medieval knight for like 5 different monarchs. He went from being landless and poor to influencing a lot of 13th century politics in England, serving like 5 different monarchs. That's bonkers. I don't actually know much about this time in history except for like Robin Hood, because apparently he was a knight for those figureheads that are featured in Robin Hood, like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Richard the Lionheart and King John. I'm really hoping that this has a lot of political intrigue in it and some good political anecdotes, because that's the kind of stuff that I find really interesting in biographies like this. So these next 2 books take place in kind of wintry settings. I don't know if they have holiday stuff in them, but that's kind of how I decided on these 2. They also share a word in the title, a specific word, that word being the word bear, like the animal. The first one is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is a historical fantasy that is inspired by Russian folklore. It's the first book in the Winter Night trilogy. It's about a young girl named Vasilisa growing up in a Russian village who hears the fairy tales about household spirits and a winter demon called Frost. However, her new stepmother arrives and decides to ban all talk and any honoring of these household spirits. Because of that, crops start failing, strange creatures start to appear, and things go really, really wrong in the village. So it's up to Vasilisa to save not only her family, but the entire village. Even though this isn't a Christmas story, it gives hefty, like, holiday adjacent kind of stuff. This is the first in a trilogy. If I end up really liking it, I will probably read the second book. If I only just kind of like it, I probably will just treat it as a standalone, unless there is some huge-ass cliffhanger that leaves me wanting to know more. However, this is a bit of a coin toss for me, so we'll see how this plays out, but I'm excited. Last but not least, Beartown by Frederik Backman. So I'm a Frederik Backman fan for the most part. I've only read 2 of his other books. The first one that I read was A Man Called Ova, which I loved, 5 stars, bawled my pretty little eyes out. And then I read Anxious People. People love Anxious People. I hated it. I thought it was a caricature of what anxiety is. And that put me on pause with Frederik Backman, and that's okay, because now I'm getting around to this. I've heard Beartown is really amazing. It's actually part of a trilogy called the Beartown trilogy, first book. This is considered literary fiction. It might be considered sports fiction because it does center around a kind of hockey-obsessed town. So this small, struggling town that this book takes place in has sent their ice hockey team to national semifinals. However, during the match, a really violent act takes place, and the rest of the book is about the fallout from the violence. Honestly, the plot sounds really boring to me, and I am trying to really embrace the fact that I'm a character-driven reader and that I need to be okay with the plot sounding boring. What I'm hoping is that this is a case of that, where the plot sounds really, really boring, and that leaves so much room for character growth and development and eventually attachment to these characters. All right, and that's it. In the comments below, let me know if you enjoy reading like holiday themed books. I don't typically do that. This is the first time I'm being actually intentional about something like that, so we'll see what comes of this, if I like any of those 3 that I chose. Regardless, thanks for hanging out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. I will see you next time, and happy reading.